Hey everyone, back with another midweek analysis here on EU. So continuing on the conversation from last week, in the last 7 days, we've been quite bullish. So as I mentioned, let's start off with the weekly, and we're going to see how, I had this weekly imbalance here drawn out, and I wanted to see how price reacts off of it, because the lower time frames was looking like it was bearish, it was pulling back. But concentrating on the weekly here, we can see I had a weekly weak high pointed out, because again, this high failed to break this low that created it. So when price stalled here and had this bullish candle, obviously it starts to give a weak high scenario at that time. At this moment, it looks like we're probably going to smash this today off of CPI, but it might not. So you can see we're having a bullish couple weeks here, and we've reacted off of this weekly imbalance nicely. So it's continuing with that bullish narrative, that bullish trend. We drop down to the daily. I'll drag this across so we can just see where the liquidity was swept. That previous week here was swept, and price has reacted bullish ever since. On Thursday the 6th of July, we've just started making lower time frame higher highs. You can see here now that on the daily, the trend change back to bullish is pretty much confirmed here. You can see we're probably going to close above this candle today, but either way we stabbed above, making a new high. This price action was very telling. It was very corrective, leaving a buy side liquidity. I believe I discussed this all last week. It was coming back very correctively. There was no real bullish and bearish momentum. It was building up, building liquidity, coming back to a higher time frame point of interest, POI, which was this weekly imbalance. And we have swept some previous lows here and had bullish reactions. The most recent low sweeping last week, giving the biggest bullish reaction, of course, right? So we'll go down to the 4 hour. So you can see here, it paints the picture a lot more. As I mentioned last week, I used the 4 hour to sort of have my swing structure, to show me what the higher time frame is doing, because it has a good read on the daily. So you can see where previous weeks we was creating that lower low structure, and then here we swept and went on to make a higher high. So once this high, this internal high was broken, I saw this as a possible trend change. So from this point onwards, that's how I was reading it. So once this high was closed above here, you can see I changed the color again to blue, and it was just a possible trend change. And then once this high was broken again on Monday, it was like, okay, trend change looks confirmed. We're starting to take out higher time frame liquidity points, and you can see that the trend looks to be continuing from our weekly imbalance, which is great, right? So we've got our bullish narrative. So just to go over again, broke this high on the 4 hour, closed above it really strongly. As you can see again here, there's no momentum in this pullback like it was when it broke this possible high, but either way, we broke both highs very bullishly, and the pullbacks just haven't been the same. So we broke this high here, and we're taking out these higher time frame liquidity. We broke this high here today, most recently on CPI, and you can see price is still going, but we'll get to that. So 4 hour structure now is bullish after this bearish pullback, right? Back into the bullish phase. Go down to the 1 hour. More of the same again on the 1 hour. You can see where price was choppy, pulling down, leaving buy side liquidity above all of these old highs. We swept it one last time, right? Broke above. This was our 1 hour leg. We had a shallow pullback. These aren't, if we look at the concept of premium and discount, we didn't really pull back into discount, but this is showing the momentum and the strength that we currently have with this bullish trend that we've got going on now, that we're continuing. Price is pulling back, being real choppy. Look how many hours is in this pullback. You know, may have been some news events here or just some sweeps of liquidity, and then, you know, we swept this low again, broke up high, pullback, broke up high, choppy pullback again, not even coming out of the premium on any of these legs yet. This one made it just about to the discount, and back into this 1 hour, you know, fair value gap, respected it, and we continued again to make new highs. So you can see clearer now where I'm marking out these higher highs and higher lows. Let's go over to DXY before going into the lower time frames again, and we'll show the same picture and what DXY is showing us. So here's DXY on the weekly. Let me move this across. As I had also pointed out on DXY, right, we had this trend going, creating lower lows and lower highs, which is why I didn't believe, even though we stalled here and pulled back slightly, that we were in any kind of US dollar bullish phase, which I mentioned in my previous video. For me, it was just a pullback. We had this weekly imbalance, the same as we did on EU. We stabbed through it multiple times, but you can see on the weekly we wasn't closing beyond it, so it was still respecting it, which is why I had it there just as a point of interest, right? Let's go down to the daily. So similar stories on the daily. You can see during this bullish pullback, right, we can see the daily was making, you know, it made a bottom here, swept it, broke this high, made a new high internally, and was pulling back bullish to this POI. And this again was very corrective, like EU, so it wasn't convincing. We hadn't broken a swing high or anything, so there was no need for me to think the higher time frames had switched to bullish. So let's go into last week. You can see on the Thursday we came up for one last time, swept the liquidity of that previous week, and broke down. We've been bearish ever since. Massive strong bearish candles day after day, taking all this sell side liquidity built up on DXY. Again, you can see how I'm using my colors here to just note how DXY is behaving. We didn't reach this buy side liquidity target. The market had just swept the previous week and got a lower low. That's when I started changing my colors to blue. That was where the trend change was a bit more clearer on DXY. You can see these lows here and this low here were violated. They were closed beyond. So you can see that we gave a good lower low, and it looked like the bearish momentum was going to continue. We had a slight pullback again, not really going into any premium, but just partially filling this 4 hour fair value gap and continuing on, right? And we had, as you see on the daily, we had this daily area just to keep an eye on for pullbacks. We may have pulled back into a premium from there. Go down to the hourly, just look a bit closer at the price. So price, as we had shown last week, it was making this choppy, indecisive pullback, just building up the sell side liquidity, which in turn was liquidated and targeted, right? I believe I mentioned last week's video that I was very unsure on the direction of DXY here because of that, right? There was no clear high highs, there was no trend being shown. So now we're back into trend mode. We've broken down, pulled back, you know, swept that high, broken down again, pulled back. There was a small 1 hour order block in here and whatnot, but it's fairly irrelevant. So today we're at today's price action. You can see we pulled back again. We just filled this 1 hour fair value gap. We didn't even come into a premium of this leg. You know, I thought we may come up and fill this gap because DXY opened up in that way. So I was thinking, you know, for a high probability buys, we could get back to this gap on DXY. But from the morning, we had buy opportunities, well, dollar strength, EU sell opportunities while it was pulling back from this discount. So discount, and there was, I think an order block here as a higher time frame POI, right? And now we've broken that down. So you can see how the narrative played out, how the trend's playing out, where the liquidity has been going and targeting, and how the trend continued using the higher time frame narratives I was pointing out from last week. So you just have to be patient to do your high probability sells and buys from discount and premium, and let the price action in the lower time frame structure just lead your way. You don't want to get too carried away with pullbacks, right? Because as you can see, they can be very shallow, and you want to target the runs with the trend, because as you can see, they can run way further than any pullback's going to be. We'll go back to EU now. I'll take you through what I was looking at today. So back on EU, I'm going to analyze this portion, right, and here, because we're working within this leg, okay? So before CPU, because there's no chance to get in this trade, of course. So I'll take us down to the 15-minute. So here's my narrative. This was for the US. You can have a read through that and see how I establish my narrative and keep my thoughts on screen as I'm trading. And I'll modify that, once we get to New York, which is what it was updated for. You can see overnight during Asia, we had come up from the lows of Tuesday's price action. Overnight, crawled up slowly overnight, taking the previous daily high, which is what? Buy side liquidity, right? So the buy side liquidity resting above this previous daily high. So once we had taken that out and I'd come into the market in the morning for London, of course, if you're familiar with ICT concepts, we'd prefer this Asia high to get swept as well before heading down, because I was looking for sells, because we're so in the premium and we've taken that previous daily high that you get some high probability sells. I don't reach for the moon, but I wait for some structure, some 15-minute structure changes, and I will target the most to like Asia lows. But that aside, we see we've made that high. We've taken out the previous day high, which is buy side liquidity. We didn't take out that high in Frankfurt or in London, but you can follow the money, right? You can follow the order flow. So we had a small breaker structure here and a retest, but it was nothing convincing. I got swerved on my trade. I wanted a trade from this high with this as inducement. So this was going to be my inducement here. I wanted this to come up, tap me in and fall back down, but it did it without me. It swept this previous high and just made its way down. So at this point, because it's against trend, I didn't want to keep following. There was no high probability sells. Because CPI is such a big news event, it looked like price was just being choppy through London, creating liquidity for CPI. So as you can see with this buy side liquidity trend line here, this is all the liquidity I identified. All of these highs become buy side liquidity. We go into buy mode, right? So I was looking for a breaker structure, breaking one of these highs and coming back down to an order block and giving me an entry. You can see we tapped into a 15-minute order block here, but it's nothing I would want to set an order from, with news on the horizon, and we're still in a premium, as you can see here, of this 1 hour leg and this 15-minute leg. We're still very much in a premium. So I'd prefer sells, but you can see this price action was indicating we're going to have buys later. We're going to continue our trend. So I was waiting for a high probability buy once we got to this point. Once London had finished and we swept London lows, I wouldn't want to take a sell having taken the liquidity from the previous session. And then CPI has come into the game and just taken out this trend line, taken out this previous high over here, and now it's gunning for the weak highs that I showed on the higher time frame. So what we can see now is, and what I would look forward to for the rest of the week, kind of, if these highs get taken out, especially at 1.11, this is a massive buy side liquidity area, right? This is what triggered that pullback before. So I would expect price from this massive premium that it's going to be in, especially from whichever leg it creates here on the 1 hour, for example. Let's say if it goes up to here to 1.1, what I'm going to expect is high probability sells and pullbacks. So once that liquidity is taken out and we get, a 15-minute structure form up here, and if we get a breaker structure to the downside, I'll be looking for sells. I'll be looking for sells down into this point here, right? Because we're going to have these 1 hour order blocks here. We're going to have this liquidity that caused the break of structure. So until we're back into a discount or equilibrium, I'll be looking for those sells from that point on for the last couple of days of the week, if we can get involved and it looks high probability. So I hope you enjoyed this session. There's a lot of information in there, and I hope I kept us up to date with what happened from the current week. If there's any questions or any concepts or anything I mentioned that you would like me to explain, just leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video next week.